My parents said I was half the woman my sister is, until I revealed my $84,000 secret at dinner. My name is Nora, and I've spent my entire life being invisible. Not the kind of invisible where people don't see you. The kind where they look right through you, searching for someone better on the other side. For 32 years, I was the shadow to my sister's light. Echo to her voice. The footnote to her story. But on a cool autumn evening last October, I finally stepped out of that shadow. Not with a scream or a fight, but with a single quiet truth that changed everything. They say revenge is best served cold. Mine wasn't revenge at all. It was simply the moment I stopped accepting the crumbs of love they'd convinced me I deserved. This is the story of how I saved my family's home, their pride, and ultimately myself, after decades of being their emotional and financial ATM. What they never realized was that every dollar I gave them, every hour I sacrificed, every dream I postponed for their comfort was being meticulously recorded, not on paper but in the deepening hollows of my heart. Growing up as Clara's sister meant growing up with constant comparison. She was the golden child, beautiful, charismatic, the kind of person who entered rooms and immediately owned. I was Nora, the reliable one, quiet one, the one who made things work. Our childhood home was filled with trophies: Clara's dance competitions, Clara's beauty pageants, Clara's academic achievements. My report cards, always straight as, were met with distracted nods. My own achievements felt like consolation prizes in the grand competition I never signed up for. When we were teenagers, my mother would introduce us at family gatherings with a telling difference. "This is Clara, she's going to change the world someday," followed by, "And this is Nora, she's so helpful around the house." I learned to find worth in being needed rather than wanted. I became the family fixer, the emotional support, the steady hand when storms came. I convinced myself this was enough, that being essential, even if invisible, was its own kind of love. The exploitation began subtly when I was 16. Clara needed a new laptop for her advanced placement classes. My parents couldn't afford it, or so they claimed. "Nora, sweetie," my mother said, her voice honeyed with manipulation, "you're so good with money. And that job at the library. Couldn't you help your sister out? Just this once." I emptied my savings account. $437 that I'd been putting aside for a photography class I desperately wanted to take. Clara got her laptop. I got a pat on the head and the quiet understanding that my desires were optional, while hers were essential. It wasn't just once. When Clara needed prom dresses, I worked extra shifts. When she needed SAT prep courses, I tutored neighborhood kids to pay for them. When she needed spending money for her first semester at Princeton, I deferred my own college acceptance for a year to work full-time. "It's just temporary," my father assured me. "Clara has such potential. Once she's established, she'll help you too." She never did. By 23, I had put myself through community college while working 2 jobs. I'd also contributed over $30,000 to Clara's education. Money my parents had guilt out of me semester after semester. "She needs to focus on her studies," my mother would say. "You're so good at balancing work and school. You can handle it." What they really meant was, "You matter less. Your time is worth less. Your dreams can wait." After college, community for me, Ivy League for Clara, I found work at a logistics firm. It wasn't glamorous, but I had a gift for numbers, for seeing patterns others missed. While Clara posted Instagram photos from fashion shows and cocktail parties, I built spreadsheets and financial models that kept businesses afloat. By 28, I was managing accounts worth millions, though you'd never know it from my modest apartment or the way my parents still asked when I was going to find a real career. I lived simply, saved aggressively, and built a financial cushion that gave me a quiet confidence they couldn't see. I dated occasionally, but relationships always seemed to fizzle. Men would meet Clara at family dinners and something would shift, a subtle recalibration of worth. One boyfriend actually said, "It's weird how you two are sisters. She's so, and you're so." He never finished the sentence. He didn't need to. What no one knew was that while Clara was building her glamorous life, I was secretly paying for her car insurance, her health insurance when she was between jobs, the security deposit on her first apartment, the emergency credit card bill when she overspent in Paris. My parents knew, of course. They were the ones who called me each time, voices tight with concern for Clara's comfort, never once questioning what these constant financial demands were doing to my own stability. "She just needs a little help getting established," they'd say. "You're so good with money, Nora. So responsible." Responsible. The word they used when they meant exploitable. The real betrayal wasn't a single moment. It was the slow erosion of self-worth that comes from a lifetime of being measured and found wanting. But there was one night that crystallized everything. It was my 30th birthday. I'd just been promoted to senior financial analyst, a position that had never been given to someone under 40 at my firm. I was proud, genuinely proud, for perhaps the first time in my adult life. I invited my parents and Clara to dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. I'd made reservations weeks in advance, chosen a place with a private room, ordered a special cake. For once, I wanted to be celebrated. My parents arrived 30 minutes late. Clara didn't show at all. She got a last-minute invitation to a networking event, my mother explained, not quite meeting my eyes. You know how important these connections are for her career. We ate in near silence. When I mentioned my promotion, my father nodded and immediately pivoted to Clara's latest achievement. She'd been featured in a business magazine's 30 Under 30-inch list. "Can you believe it?" he beamed. "Our Clara recognized like that. We always knew she was special." My mother pulled out the magazine she'd brought in her purse, passing it across the table. "We brought you a copy. Thought you might want to frame it for your apartment." I stared at my sister's smiling face on the glossy page, the headline reading "Fashion's Rising Star." The cake arrived with a single candle. No one sang. My father checked his watch. "We should probably get going," he said. "Your mother has her book club early tomorrow." They left before dessert was finished. My mother kissed my cheek and whispered, "We're proud of you too, honey. In our own way." What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd received a call from Clara earlier that day. "Nora, I need a favor," she'd said, her voice carrying that familiar note of entitlement disguised as sisterly intimacy. "I'm up for this amazing opportunity, but I need to look the part. This Chanel bag. It's only $4,000. I'll pay you back as soon as my next commission comes in." Said yes, of course. Always said yes. I'd transferred the money before our call ended. And now, sitting alone in that private room, I realized the networking event that had kept her from my birthday dinner was probably a shopping trip with my money. I sat alone in that private room for another hour, surrounded by empty chairs and half-eaten cake, something breaking and reforming inside me. That night I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet. Every dollar I'd given to Clara over the years. Every loan to my parents that was never repaid. Every sacrifice I'd made that had been taken for granted. The total made me physically ill. $157,432. Enough for a down payment on a house. Enough to start the business I'd been dreaming of for years. Enough to have changed the entire trajectory of my life. 2 days later, I received a call that would change everything. The call came from my father's secretary, Ellen. We'd always been friendly. She'd worked for my dad's law firm for 20 years and had watched Clara and me grow up. "Nora," she said, her voice unusually tight. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but I'm worried about your parents." She explained that my father had been distracted, making mistakes at work. She'd accidentally seen some papers on his desk, foreclosure notices for their home. "The economy hit the firm hard," she said. "And your father, he made some investments that didn't pan out. They're 3 months behind on the mortgage. That beautiful colonial house had been their pride for decades. The place where my mother hosted Christmas parties that were the envy of the neighborhood. The home my father pointed to as proof that he'd made it. I thanked Ellen and hung up, my mind already calculating. That night, I accessed public records and confirmed what she'd told me. The situation was worse than she knew. They weren't just behind. They were underwater on the mortgage after taking out a second loan to help Clara start her business 3 years ago, a business that was now thriving according to her Instagram. A business she'd never once offered to repay them for. The next morning I called in sick to work and drove to their neighborhood. I parked down the street and watched my father leave for work. He looked older, shoulders hunched in a way I'd never seen before. My mother left an hour later for her volunteer work at the hospital. I sat in my car, staring at the house that held so many complicated memories. The window of my childhood bedroom, the oak tree Clara and I had climbed as kids, the porch where my father had taken countless photos of Clara before proms and dances, while I stood to the side, holding her purse. I made my decision without hesitation. The next day, I transferred $84,000 from my savings to a new account. It represented years of careful investing, overtime work, and side consulting jobs. It was meant to be the seed money for my own business. Instead, I walked into their bank and paid off the outstanding mortgage balance and penalties. I made the bank manager promise absolute confidentiality. I signed papers ensuring the payment would appear as a mortgage restructuring, rather than a gift or third-party payment. I didn't do it for gratitude. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because despite everything they were my family. And because I needed to prove something to myself, that I could save them even if they never knew it was me. 2 weeks later, I overheard my mother on the phone with a friend. Her voice light with relief. "It was the strangest thing," she said. "The bank called and said there had been some kind of error in our favor. Something about interest calculations and a class action settlement. Richard is looking into it, but we're not asking too many questions." That same day, Clara posted photos from her vacation in Santorini. "Some of us were born to live the good life," her caption read. What she didn't mention was the $5,000 I'd wired her the previous month for that very vacation. Another emergency she'd never repay. I smiled at my phone screen, a new kind of strength settling into my bones. I knew something they didn't. I was capable of more than any of them had ever imagined. That night, I reopened my business plan and started again from scratch. The money was gone, but the vision remained. I would build something of my own, something they couldn't ignore or diminish. Over the next 6 months, I worked harder than I ever had. Days at the firm, nights building my financial consulting business. I took out a small loan, won my first 2 clients, then 5 more. I hired an assistant, then a junior analyst. During those months, the calls from Clara and my parents continued. Small emergencies, financial favors. But for the first time in my life I began saying no. "I'm sorry I can't right now," became my mantra. "But it's only $500, Clara whined during one call. "You always have money saved." "Not anymore," I replied truthfully. "What do you mean? What could you possibly be spending it on?" The question revealed everything about how she saw me. As a resource, not a person with dreams of her own. "Myself," I answered simply and hung up. By the time Clara announced she was coming home for a visit, I had a thriving business with 12 employees and a downtown office. Not that my family knew any of this. In their minds, I was still just Nora, dependable, unremarkable Nora, the ATM that had finally run out of cash. I hadn't planned to reveal my secret. The $84,000 was a gift I'd made peace with giving anonymously. But when Clara announced she wanted a family dinner during her visit home, something shifted inside me. For once, I had news worth sharing. My company had just secured a contract with a major international corporation, the kind of deal that would put us on the map. After years of silence, I wanted to finally speak. That I bought a new dress for the occasion. Not my usual practical attire, but something that made me feel confident. I practiced what I would say, how I would tell them about my business. Not boasting, just stating facts. I imagined their surprised faces, their belated pride. The day before the dinner, I received a text from Clara. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, sis. I have huge news to share with everyone." My stomach tightened. Course she did. Then came another text. "Also, can you spot me $2,000? My credit card is maxed and I need to pick up my engagement ring from being sized. I'll pay you back next month, promise." I stared at the message for a long time. Engagement ring. So that was her big news. And even in this moment, she was asking for money. I didn't respond. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times I'd emptied my accounts for them. All the dreams I'd deferred. All the times I'd been told, explicitly or implicitly, that my needs mattered less. I pulled out my laptop and opened a document I'd been working on for months. A detailed accounting of every dollar I'd given to my family over the years. Every sacrifice. Every broken promise of repayment. I printed it out. 37 pages. I didn't know if I would show it to them. I just needed to hold the physical evidence of my exploitation in my hands. I arrived at my parents' house exactly on time. Clara's car, a new luxury model, was already in the driveway. Inside, I could hear laughter before I even rang the bell. My mother answered, hugging me briefly before pulling me inside. "Clara's been telling us about her promotion. Creative director at 31. Can you believe it?" The living room felt like it always did when Clara was home. Brighter, louder, centered around her magnetic presence. She sat on the couch, my father beside her, his face glowing with pride as she showed him something on her phone. "Nora," Clara exclaimed, looking up. "Come see the office they're giving me. It has a view of the entire city." I smiled and moved closer, playing my familiar role. The supportive sister. The good sport. The audience member in the Clara show. She pulled me aside in the kitchen later, voice low. "Did you get my text? About the money?" "I did," I replied. "And?" Her perfectly manicured hand was already outstretched, as if my agreement was a foregone conclusion. "I can't, Clara." Her face hardened. "What do you mean you can't? It's just $2,000. I know you have it." "I don't actually." She rolled her eyes. "Come on, Nora. You always have money squirreled away. It's not like you have anything to spend it on." The casual cruelty of her assumption stung, but I kept my expression neutral. "I'm sorry. The answer is no." She stared at me, genuinely confused by this deviation from our established pattern. Then her face softened into a manipulative smile. "Is this about my engagement? Are you jealous?" "Oh, Nora, you'll find someone too someday." I didn't respond. I simply turned and walked back to the dining room, where my mother was setting the table with the good china, the set they only used for special occasions. Clara's occasions. Dinner proceeded as these family gatherings always did. Clara dominated the conversation, my parents hanging on every word. I answered questions when asked, mostly about Clara's life rather than my own. "So," my mother said during a brief lull, "Clara tells us she might be featured in Vogue next month. Isn't that incredible?" I nodded, pushing food around my plate. "That's amazing, Clara. What about you, Nora?" Clara asked, her tone carrying that familiar note of performative interest. "Still at the same company." Took a breath. "Actually, Oh, before I forget," Clara interrupted, "I have another announcement." She extended her left hand dramatically, revealing an enormous diamond ring. "James proposed last weekend in Paris." The table erupted. My mother actually cried. My father stood to hug her. I offered congratulations that no one really heard. As they discussed wedding venues and dates, I felt a strange calm descend. This moment, this exact moment of being erased yet again, crystallized everything. I didn't need a plan anymore. I just needed the truth. The champagne flowed freely as Clara described James's elaborate proposal at the Eiffel Tower. My mother was already discussing color schemes and flower arrangements. My father kept saying, "My little girl getting married," as if he couldn't quite believe it. "We're thinking a spring wedding," Clara said. "Something lavish but tasteful. The guest list is already at 300. "Whatever you want, sweetheart," my father said. "This is your moment to shine." My mother turned to me, her expression softening into something like pity. "Nora, you'll be the maid of honor, of course. We'll find you a dress that's flattering." I smiled tightly. "That sounds nice. You know," my mother continued, wine loosening her tongue, "I was just telling your father the other day how different you two turned out. It's fascinating really how children from the same family can take such different paths." Clara laughed lightly. "Mom, don't start." "No, I'm just saying," my mother insisted. "Clara always reaching for the stars and Nora, well, you've always been content with less. There's nothing wrong with that." My father nodded sagely. "You know, Nora, I wish you'd take a little more initiative like your sister. You're such a kind soul, but you've always played it safe. You were always more practical than ambitious," he continued, chuckling. "Not a bad thing. But your sister, she's the real go-getter." Clara tilted her head, her expression a practiced mix of charm and condescension. "Mom, don't be too hard on her. Not everyone's meant to shine. Some people are meant to support the ones who do." They laughed, all three of them, as if they'd shared a harmless inside joke. My mother sighed, reaching over to pat my hand. "You've done fine, Nora. But truthfully, you've always been half the woman Clara is." The words hung in the air like smoke. I set down my fork, wiped my lips gently with my napkin, and looked directly at my mother. "You're right," I said quietly. The laughter dimmed. Clara's smirk faltered. "But since I'm only half the woman she is," I continued, my voice steady, "I guess it's fair she gives you back half the money I spent saving your house." The room went silent. My father froze mid-breath. My mother's face went pale. Clara blinked, as if she'd misheard. What money?" she whispered. "The $84,000, I said calmly. "The one I wired to the bank last year when your mortgage was 3 months overdue. I wasn't going to mention it. But since we're comparing worth tonight." No one moved. The clink of my father's fork hitting his plate was the only sound. "That's not possible," my father finally said, his voice hoarse. "The bank said there was an accounting error in our favor. A settlement." I smiled softly. "There was no error. No settlement. Paid it. All of it. The outstanding balance, the penalties, everything." My mother's eyes filled with tears. Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I didn't need to," I replied. "I didn't do it for a thank you. I did it so you wouldn't lose your home." My father leaned forward, voice trembling. You saved us. How did you even have that kind of money?" Clara's eyes darted between us, her confidence visibly melting. "That can't be true. You don't even." "I don't even what?" "Cut in. Make as much as you. Post as much as you. Shine as bright as you." My tone stayed calm, but it sliced cleaner than anger ever could. "I guess while you were collecting likes, I was collecting invoices." I reached into my purse and pulled out the document I'd printed. All 37 pages. "And speaking of invoices," I said, sliding it across the table, "here's an itemized list of every dollar I've given this family over the past 16 years. $157,432 in total. Not including the mortgage." My father picked up the first page with trembling hands. "What is this?" "It's a record," I said simply. "Every time Clara needed tuition money. Every time you needed help with property taxes. Every emergency that somehow became my financial responsibility." I turned to Clara. "Including the $5,000 I sent you for your Santorini vacation." The one where you posted that you were born to live the good life. Funny how you never mentioned who paid for that good life. Clara's face had lost all its color. Nora, I never knew. You never asked, I corrected. None of you did. You just took and took and took, and I gave. And gave and gave, because that's what I was trained to do from childhood. To believe my needs mattered less. To believe I was worth less. I took a breath, steadying myself. I've been building my own financial consulting firm for the past 6 months. Before that, I worked 60-hour weeks for years, saving everything I could. The money I gave you was supposed to be my startup capital. I reached into my purse and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. Clarity Financial Solutions. I'm the founder and CEO. We just signed a contract with Meridian Global last week. It's worth 7 figures. My father picked up the card with trembling fingers. I don't understand. Why didn't you ever say anything? When would I have said it? Asked simply. Between Clara's promotions and Clara's vacations and Clara's engagement, there's never been room for my story in this family. My mother was openly crying now. Nora, we never meant to. Yes, you did, I said, my voice finally breaking. You meant every bit of it. You meant it. When you called me to bail Clara out of credit card debt while telling me how brilliant she was. You meant it when you asked me to defer college so she could have spending money at Princeton. You meant it when you called me half the woman she is tonight. I stood up, smoothing my dress. I should go. Congratulations on your engagement, Clara. Happy for you. My mother reached for my hand, her eyes pleading. Nora, please don't leave like this. I looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. I'm not leaving angry. I'm just finally leaving with the truth. I love you all. I always have. But I needed you to see me. Just once. As I turned to go, my father's voice stopped me. We owe you everything. Paused at the door. Yes, I said quietly. You do. And then I walked out into the cool night air, feeling lighter than I had in 32 years. I didn't hear from any of them for 2 weeks. No calls, no texts, no apologies. Just silence. The same silence I'd lived with for years, only now it felt different. Cleaner. Somehow. Honest. I threw myself into work, expanding my business, meeting with potential clients. I slept better than I had in years, unburdened by the constant weight of their expectations and needs. On the 15th day, there was a knock at my apartment door. Clara stood there, looking smaller somehow. The usual glossy perfection was missing. Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, her eyes red-rimmed. Can I come in? She asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She entered slowly, taking in my space as if seeing it for the first time. In truth, she probably was. She'd only visited twice in the 5 years I'd lived there. She noticed the framed business license on my wall, the industry awards I'd received at my previous job, the bookshelf filled with financial texts and business biographies. I didn't know, she said finally, her voice small, about any of it. You never asked, I replied. She nodded, accepting this. I've been going through your list. The money. All of it. Swallowed hard. I had no idea it was so much. Didn't you? Yes. You never wondered how you afforded Princeton, or that apartment in Manhattan, or all those emergencies that magically resolved themselves. She looked down. I guess I just thought, Mom and Dad. Mom and Dad could barely afford their own lives, I said. They certainly couldn't afford yours. She nodded again, tears spilling down her cheeks. I've been so selfish. I didn't contradict her. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This is everything I have right now. It's not enough, not nearly enough, but it's a start. I took the envelope and looked inside. A check for $27,000. I sold my car, she explained. And some jewelry. And I've set up a payment plan for the rest. It'll take time, but I'll pay back every penny. I set the check on the coffee table. This isn't about money, Clara. I know, she said, her voice breaking. It's about seeing you. Really seeing you. She took a shuddering breath. I failed at that. We all did. We talked for hours that day. Really talked, perhaps for the first time. She asked about my business, my plans, my dreams. She listened without interrupting, without comparing, without diminishing. When she left, she hugged me awkwardly. We'd never been physically affectionate and whispered, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm going to earn it." I didn't say I forgave her, because I didn't. Not yet. My parents were a different story. They didn't come to me, they sent a letter. 3 pages of excuses thinly disguised as apologies. "We always wanted what was best for both our girls," my mother wrote. "We never meant to make you feel less valued." But they had. And their inability to acknowledge that simple truth told me everything I needed to know. I didn't respond to their letter. Instead, I sent them an invoice, professionally printed with my company's letterhead. It detailed the $84,000 mortgage payment, with interest calculated at standard market rates. Due upon receipt. I wrote at the bottom. My father called the next day, his voice tight with indignation. "This is how you respond to our apology? With a bill?" "It's not a bill," I replied calmly. "It's a boundary. We're your parents, Nora, not clients. And I'm your daughter," I said, "not your bank." The silence that followed was heavy with realization. "We can't pay this," he finally said. "Not all at once." "I know," I replied. "I waited 16 years for recognition. You can wait a few years to repay your debt." I hung up, hands shaking but resolve firm. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived from my father's law firm. Inside was a legally binding repayment agreement, signed by both my parents. They would pay me $1,000 per month until the debt was settled. It wasn't about the money. It was about acknowledgement, about consequences, about finally being seen as someone whose resources and sacrifices mattered. Clara kept her word. She sold her designer wardrobe, moved to a smaller apartment, took on freelance work in addition to her job. Every month, a check arrived with a handwritten note, sometimes just a line or two, sometimes pages of reflection. "I'm learning to live within my means," she wrote once. "It's humbling. I should have learned this years ago." My parents' checks came too, on time without notes. The mechanical fulfillment of an obligation, not a heartfelt amends. 6 months passed. My business thrived. I bought a small house, hired more employees, began mentoring young women in financial literacy. Clara and I developed a cautious new relationship. Not close, not yet, but honest in a way we'd never been. She postponed her wedding indefinitely, telling me, "I need to figure out who I am when I'm not being celebrated." My parents remained distant. The monthly checks were our only communication. Until my mother showed up at my office one Tuesday afternoon, unannounced. She sat across from my desk, taking in the view, the elegant furnishings, the framed article about my company in the Financial Times. "You've done well," she said finally. "Yes," I agreed. "I have." She twisted her hands in her lap. "I've been seeing a therapist. She suggested I might have favored Clara unfairly." I said nothing. "She used the word exploitation," my mother continued, her voice small. "She said we exploited your sense of responsibility, your love for us." Waited. "I didn't want to believe her," my mother said. "But then I found this." She reached into her purse and pulled out a faded photograph. Me at 17 holding an acceptance letter from the state university. "You were so proud," she said. "And we asked you to defer. For Clara." I remembered that day with perfect clarity. The joy of the acceptance. The crushing weight of their request. The tears I'd shed alone in my room. "I'm sorry, Nora," she whispered. "I'm so deeply sorry." For the first time, Her apology held no excuses, no justifications, just raw, painful truth. "I don't know if you can ever forgive us," she said. "I'm not sure we deserve it. But I want you to know that I see you now. I see what we did. And I'm ashamed." I didn't cry, though I wanted to. 'Cause for the first time I felt seen. Not because I'd proven something, but because she'd finally acknowledged the truth. "It's a start," I said quietly. Now, when I look back at that dinner, the humiliation, the silence, the truth that followed, I realize it wasn't revenge. It was liberation. Sometimes the people closest to you can't see your worth until it stands quietly in front of them, refusing to shrink anymore. I didn't need them to apologize. I needed them to see. And when they finally did, the silence that followed was worth every unspoken word that came before it. Forgiveness didn't come easily. It still hasn't, not completely. Some wounds are too deep to heal with simple words. My relationship with Clara has evolved into something cautiously respectful. She's changed. Genuinely changed. She completed her repayment last month, having lived frugally for 2 years to do so. She's engaged again, to a different man, a kindergarten teacher with a kind smile and modest ambitions. "He loves me for me," she told me over coffee recently. "Not for what I appear to be. My parents are a work in progress. My father still struggles to see his role in what happened. My mother tries harder, attending therapy regularly, making small gestures of recognition and respect. They've paid back nearly half of what they owe. Each payment is a tangible acknowledgement of the imbalance that defined our family for decades. My business continues to grow. I've hired 30 more people, opened offices in 3 cities. I specialize in helping women achieve financial independence, many of them coming from situations where their resources were drained by family obligations. Last month, I was the one featured in a magazine, Forbes, a profile on women entrepreneurs, changing the financial industry. I didn't send my parents a copy. I didn't need to. The money. Clara's debt is settled. My parents continue to pay. But it was never about the money. It was about recognition, about consequences, about finally being valued. Sometimes I think about that version of myself, the one who transferred $84,000 without expecting acknowledgement, the one who lived in shadows, believing she deserved less. I want to tell her she was always enough, that her worth wasn't measured by their recognition. But then she already knew that. She just needed them to know it too. There's a strange power in being underestimated, in being overlooked. Teaches you to find value within yourself rather than in others' approval. I still have dinner with my parents once a month. Not at their house. Neutral territory, a restaurant downtown. We talk differently now, with more honesty, more equality. The pedestal is gone. The golden child mythology has crumbled. Last week, my father asked me to help him set up a retirement plan. "I trust your judgment," he said. Words that would have been unimaginable 2 years ago. My mother watches me now, really sees me, in a way she never did before. Sometimes I catch her studying my face with a mixture of pride and regret. "You were never half of anything," she told me recently. "You were whole all along. We were the broken ones. I'm still the one who helps, who fixes, who supports. But now I do it from a place of strength, not invisibility. Of choice, not obligation. And that has made all the difference. The ledger may never be fully balanced. Some debts can't be repaid with money alone. But in forcing them to see the truth, to face the years of taking me for granted, I found something more valuable than repayment. Found myself. Welcome to Boundless Revenge, where pain finds purpose, betrayal becomes power, and every heartbreak has a reckoning. If you've ever been underestimated, replaced, or broken, this is your place of power. Because here, revenge isn't cruelty, it's closure. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories of transformation and justice.